Tonight we bring you a story filled with real emotion and unforgettable tension. Our guest, Michael Arlo, is here to share an experience that changed the way he understands trust, love, and the hidden layers behind a gentle smile. He has chosen to reveal this story exactly as it happened, inspired by true events that unfolded in the heart of Thailand. Now get ready as we guide you through every moment of his journey, just as he lived it. My name is Michael Arlo, and long before I set foot in Thailand, I lived a life that felt carefully constructed yet strangely hollow. I was 33, working as an IT consultant in Manchester, following a routine that looked stable from the outside but felt increasingly suffocating from the inside. Every weekday morning, I woke at the same hour, brewed the same cup of coffee, sat at the same desk and listened to the same concerns from clients whose names blurred together. People often said I was lucky to have a predictable life, but predictability can become a prison when it stretches on without a single spark to break the darkness. What I hid from most people was the quiet storm inside me. I was tired of doing everything right, yet feeling nothing in return. I had been in a long relationship that ended after years of pretending that the future still held space for us. When it finally collapsed, it left a silence that followed me through every hallway of my apartment. I tried to fill it with work, gyms, small gatherings, even short-lived dates that felt forced from the first hello. But the silence remained, and with time it became clear that I needed distance from everything familiar. That was when the idea of traveling began. At first it was only a whisper in the back of my mind, a suggestion that maybe a foreign place, a new rhythm could break the cycle I had sunk into. Thailand kept appearing in travel blogs, conversations, and late-night videos I watched when I could not sleep. People described it as a place filled with colours, warmth, and a kind of freedom that felt impossible in the world I knew. I did not want a vacation. I wanted to step outside my old reflection and see who I might become somewhere nobody expected anything from me. The decision came quietly one night. I booked a month-long trip to Thailand without telling anyone until the ticket was already in my inbox. It felt reckless but necessary. For weeks leading up to the departure, I noticed a strange shift within myself. Instead of dragging my feet through each day, I felt anticipation building. I imagined narrow streets filled with food stalls, temples glowing under lantern light, and the hum of a city that never slept. I imagined strangers who might change my understanding of the world. I imagined, though I would not admit it then, the chance to feel something again. What surprised me most was how the people around me reacted. My colleagues congratulated me like I had announced a promotion. My mother worried but supported me. My closest friend joked that maybe I would fall in love over there, though at the time I brushed it aside with a tired smile. I told everyone I wanted culture and adventure, but the truth was simpler. I wanted to belong somewhere, even if only for a moment. In the final days before my flight, I found myself standing in front of the mirror trying to recognize the man staring back. I had grown so used to seeing exhaustion in my eyes that I hardly noticed when a small trace of excitement appeared. I packed lightly, convinced that whatever I needed I would find along the way. Cameras, guidebooks, and carefully designed itineraries did not interest me. I wanted my journey to unfold naturally, shaped by chance rather than planning. In the quiet of my apartment, I felt a pull towards something unknown, something waiting for me far from the grey skies of England. When I boarded the plane, I felt the weight of my entire life lifting from my shoulders. I watched the city shrink beneath the clouds and wondered if I would return as the same person. There was a strange calm in not knowing the answer. For the first time in years, uncertainty felt like freedom instead of fear. I did not know that the trip would lead me into a story I would remember for the rest of my life. I did not know that in the electric heart of Bangkok, among the crowds and neon lights, I would meet a woman who would make me question everything I believed about trust and connection. All I knew was that something was waiting for me on the other side of the world, and I was finally ready to face it. The moment I stepped out of Suvarnabhumi airport, the air wrapped around me like a heavy blanket, thick with humidity and unfamiliar scents. It was late evening, yet the city pulsed with a restless energy that reminded me of a living creature breathing in short, excited bursts. Neon lights flickered across the skyline, taxis honked in uneven rhythms, and the warm breeze carried the mixed aromas of grilled meat, spices, and street-side incense. It was chaotic, loud, and overwhelming, but in a way that made my heart beat faster. After years of predictable silence, the noise felt strangely comforting. The first thing I noticed was how alive everything seemed. People moved with purpose, negotiating with vendors, jumping onto motorbike taxis, chatting on the sidewalks as if the night itself refused to slow them down. I pulled my suitcase behind me, still adjusting to the heat, and walked towards the taxi stand. A driver with a wide smile waved me over, and before I knew it, I was sitting in the back seat while the city opened itself up beyond the window. Bangkok at night looked like a city painted with light. Billboards glowed against the dark sky, temples shimmered in golden reflections, and narrow side streets twisted away into shadows. As the taxi raced forward, I felt the anxiety I had carried for months begin to loosen. It was as if the city whispered an invitation to forget who I had been and to let something new guide me. I watched the motorcycles weave effortlessly between cars and wondered how anyone stayed alive in that traffic. Yet there was a rhythm to it, a messy harmony that only made sense once you surrendered to it. My hotel was near the Chao Phraya River, a modest place with a small rooftop bar and a lobby that smelled faintly of jasmine. After checking in, I left my bags untouched and went upstairs, wanting to see the view before sleep pulled me under. The rooftop was quiet, except for two travellers chatting softly in the corner. I approached the railing and stared at the river, dark and steady, moving through the city like a silent vein. Boats passed by with glowing lanterns, their reflections breaking into shimmering fragments on the water. Standing there, I felt something shift inside me. The kind of shift that tells you the world is larger than the life you built around yourself. For the first time in a long time, I sensed possibility. The city felt like a promise, and I did not know yet what it was offering. Hunger eventually pushed me back into the streets. I followed the scent of food until I reached a row of street stalls crowded with locals and tourists. A woman was cooking noodles in a sizzling pan, flames rising every time she tossed the ingredients. I pointed at the dish and she handed me a bowl with a smile that reached her eyes. The first bite felt like a revelation. The flavour was bold and bright, a mix of sweetness, spice, and something smoky that lingered on my tongue. In that moment, surrounded by strangers and noise, I felt more alive than I had in months. As I walked further down the street, I noticed performers playing traditional instruments. A group of young people laughing as they shared skewers of grilled chicken, and monks walking calmly despite the noisy surroundings. The contrasts fascinated me, old and new, sacred and chaotic, peaceful and willed. Bangkok held everything at once, as if the city refused to choose one identity. While exploring, I reached a quieter side alley illuminated by red lanterns. A small bar sat tucked between two buildings, its entrance open and inviting. Soft music drifted out, carrying a gentle melody that contrasted with the loud energy outside. Something about it drew me in. Maybe it was the calm, maybe the sense that stepping inside would change the course of my night. Without thinking too long, I walked through the doorway. The air inside was cool, scented with fruit cocktails and subtle perfume. People sat in small groups, talking in low tones. At the far end of the room, a woman with long dark hair was speaking to the bartender. Her posture was relaxed, her smile effortless, and for a brief second she glanced in my direction. It was the kind of glance that feels like a quiet spark in the air. I did not know her name, or her story, or the place she held in this vast city. I only knew that the moment our eyes met, the rest of the room faded a little. I told myself it was only curiosity, but deep down something whispered that this night would follow me long after I returned home. The bartender noticed me first and greeted me with a nod. I slipped onto a stool, still carrying the warmth of the streets on my skin. Soft jazz drifted through the bar, mixing with the quiet hum of conversations. I ordered a beer, trying not to glance too obviously at the woman at the far end, but my attention kept orbiting back to her. She wore a simple white blouse and dark jeans, yet somehow she stood out in the dim light as if the room adjusted itself around her presence. Her hair fell in soft waves over her shoulders, and when she laughed at something the bartender said, the sound settled in the air like a gentle bell. She looked at me again, this time for a heartbeat longer. There was curiosity in her eyes, not the kind that weighed or judged, but the kind that simply wanted to know who I was. The bartender placed my drink in front of me and said with a smile, "First time in Bangkok?" His accent was light but clear. "Is it that obvious?" I replied, giving a small laugh. He grinned. "Oh, you look like you are trying to see everything at once. Tourists always do that the first night." Before I could respond, the woman spoke, her voice warm and slightly teasing. "At least he is not holding a big map. That is progress." I turned to her and smiled. "Give me time. It is only my first evening." She shifted a little closer, enough that I could see the tiny gold pendant at her neck. "Where are you from?" "England? Manchester." She nodded slowly, as if trying to imagine a place she had never seen. "I am Nisha," she said, offering her hand. Her fingers were small but firm, her handshake confident. "Michael," I replied. "Nice to meet you." It was a simple exchange, the kind that happens in countless bars, in countless cities. Yet something about it felt different. There was no forced small talk, no awkward pause. Instead, our conversation seemed to find its own rhythm. She asked what brought me to Thailand, and I told her about needing a break from work, from routine, from a life that had become too heavy. I kept my explanation general, not ready to expose everything, but she listened with a focus that made even the light version feel important. "I think many people come here to escape something," she said thoughtfully, "but sometimes they end up finding something instead." "What did you find?" I asked. She tilted her head slightly, her lips curling into a small, private smile. "That is a long story. Maybe I will tell you if you come back again." I did not know whether she meant the bar, the city, or something else entirely. All I knew was that I wanted to hear that long story. The night grew quieter around us as we talked. She told me she worked part-time at a small design studio and helped her cousin with this bar on busy evenings. Her English was smooth, and when she struggled to find a word, she laughed at herself in a way that made me do the same. "What do you miss most from home?" she asked. "Honestly," I said, "I'm not sure I miss anything yet. Maybe that is the problem." She watched me for a moment, her expression softening. "Sometimes when you cannot miss anything, it means you need something new." The comment hit closer than she probably intended. For a second, I felt as if she could see the tired parts of my life I had tried to leave behind. At the same time, her presence made the heaviness feel less sharp. She had a way of making the moment feel full, as if the paused seconds between words contained their own meaning. We moved from surface topics to more personal ones without realizing it. She asked if I believed in destiny. I said I did not know, but I believed in timing. She laughed at that and said timing was just destiny wearing a watch. When I told her that was the most poetic thing I'd heard in months, she looked down, slightly shy, and took a sip of her drink. As the hours passed, the bar thinned out. A couple left, then a group of friends drifted towards the door, leaving only the bartender, Nisha, and me. I realized I had not checked my phone once. The constant urge to escape into a screen had quietly disappeared. Instead, I was anchored to the sound of her voice, the way she traced the rim of her glass with her fingertip when she was thinking, the sudden brightness in her smile when she talked about music or art. At one point, the bartender switched the music to a soft acoustic song. Nisha glanced at him with a knowing look, then turned back to me. "Do you like Bangkok so far?" she asked. "I like this place," I said. and the company even more. A faint flush rose on her cheeks. Careful, Michael. You're getting used to Thai compliments very fast. You started it, I replied. You told me destiny wears a watch. She laughed again, and in that moment, something subtle shifted inside me. It was not the sudden rush of infatuation that movies like to show, nor was it the slow, unquestioned comfort of long-term familiarity. It was something in between, a sense that I was being gently pulled toward a connection I had not expected to find, a connection that felt both fragile and strangely inevitable. Eventually, she glanced at the clock on the wall and sighed. I should help close soon. My cousin will be angry if I keep talking all night. Then I should let you work, I said, although every part of me wanted to stay. She hesitated for a breath. How long will you stay in Bangkok? About a week before I travel to the islands. I have not planned much, though. Good, she said quietly. Do not plan too much. Let the city decide some things for you. She reached for a small notepad behind the counter, tore off a piece, and wrote something on it. Sliding it across the bar, she met my eyes again. This is my number. If you want to explore the city with someone who knows where the good food is, send a message. I looked down at the paper, at the neat curves of her handwriting, then back at her. I will, I said. As I stepped out of the bar and into the warm Bangkok night, the city felt different. The same neon lights glowed, the same noise filled the air, yet beneath it all, there was a new undercurrent, a quiet thrill tying everything together. I walked back to the hotel with the slip of paper folded carefully in my pocket, my thoughts looping around her smile, her voice, her words about destiny and timing. I did not know it yet, but that small piece of paper, that simple invitation, would lead me into days that felt like a dream, and nights that would stay with me long after I was gone. The next morning, sunlight streamed through the hotel curtains, casting soft golden stripes across the room. For a moment, as I opened my eyes, I thought the previous night had been a dream. Bangkok still felt unreal to me, too alive, too bright, too full of possibilities. But the small, folded note in my pocket was proof that everything had happened just as I remembered. I took it out, tracing my thumb lightly over her handwriting, wondering if sending a message too early would seem desperate. After a few minutes of hesitation, I typed a simple greeting and asked if she wanted to show me that good food she had mentioned. I hit send before I could overthink it. Her reply came almost instantly. Let us meet near the river in an hour. I will take you somewhere special. I found myself grinning at the phone like a teenager. I showered, dressed quickly, and stepped into the warm morning air, feeling lighter than I had in months. The city was awake in a different way during the daytime. Motorbikes zipped past in steady streams, vendors arranged fresh fruit on carts, and the smell of fried dough mixed with the sweetness of mango. I walked along the riverside until I spotted her, leaning against a railing, her hair tied loosely, swaying with the breeze. Morning, she said, her smile bright enough to rival the sun. Ready for a real Bangkok day? As ready as I can be, I answered. She took me through narrow streets that twisted like lines of a maze. We stopped at a street stand where an older woman wrapped sticky rice in banana leaves. Nisha ordered for both of us and handed me the warm bundle. The first bite tasted sweet and comforting, familiar yet completely new. She watched my reaction with anticipation, laughing softly when my eyes widened. Told you I know the good places, she said. Our day unfolded naturally. She led me to a small temple hidden behind a cluster of modern buildings. Inside, the cool air carried the light scent of incense. Elderly monks sat quietly in a row, their robes glowing in the filtered sunlight. Nisha guided me through the courtyard, explaining small traditions and stories she had learned as a child. Her voice softened when she talked about her family, especially her grandmother, who had taught her how to fold lotus flowers for offerings. Do you come here often? I asked. When I need to clear my mind, she said, it reminds me of things that matter. There was something grounding about her presence. She had a way of seeing meaning in small moments, of pulling calmness out of noise. As we left the temple, she slipped into a teasing tone again and insisted on taking me to a tiny shop that sold handmade jewellery. She picked up a simple bracelet of dark wooden beads and placed it in my hand. "Wear this," she said playfully, "for luck, and to make you look less like a lost tourist." "Does it work?" She shrugged with a grin. "Only if you believe in it." We continued walking through markets filled with colourful fabrics, stacks of fresh herbs, and the chatter of merchants. Every corner seemed to reveal a new part of the city, and with every turn, I felt myself sinking deeper into the experience. But the truth was, the city was becoming linked in my mind to her. Without her guiding me, the streets would have felt overwhelming. With her beside me, they felt like magic. By afternoon, the heat grew heavier, and she suggested a break at a small cafe overlooking the river. We sat by the window watching long wooden boats cut through the water. She ordered iced drinks flavoured with lime and mint. Condensation dripped down the glass, leaving cool trails against my fingers. "You look more relaxed today," she observed. "I feel like I ran away from my whole life," I said honestly, "but somehow it does not feel wrong." "Maybe your life needed to be shaken," she replied gently. "Sometimes we hold on to things that stopped being ours long ago." Her words sat heavily in my chest, stirring feelings I had tried to ignore for years. I wanted to ask her more about her own life, but she skillfully redirected the conversation, laughing as she challenged me to guess the next place she planned to show me. I pretended to think deeply before admitting I had no idea. She seemed delighted by my confusion. As evening approached, she took me to the river once more, but this time we boarded a small ferry that carried locals from one side to the other. The boat rocked gently as we crossed, the sky turning shades of orange and pink. She stood beside me, leaning against the railing, the wind blowing strands of hair across her face. I caught myself watching her more than the sunset. "Beautiful," I said quietly, not specifying whether I meant the sky or her. She looked at me, and for a moment her smile softened into something more private. "It is nice sharing this with you," she said. The ferry reached the opposite shore, where a small night market was just beginning to wake. Lanterns were being lit, food stalls firing up their grills. People gathered, laughing, eating, moving like a slow tide through the aisles. She walked ahead, weaving effortlessly through the crowd, then turned back and reached for my hand. It startled me, not because I did not want it, but because it felt so natural, as if we had known each other far longer than a single day. We spent the evening trying new food, wandering through stalls, listening to musicians playing on makeshift stages. At some point she let go of my hand, but the warmth of her touch lingered long after. When we finally parted that night, she looked at me with an expression I could not quite decipher. It was warm, but there was something unreadable behind it, a flicker of something she did not want to reveal yet. "Tomorrow?" she asked softly. "Tomorrow," I answered. What I did not realize then was that these dreamlike days were leading me toward a night that would change everything, a night that would reveal the part of her life I had not been invited into. The 5th day of my time in Bangkok began as warmly as the ones before it. Nisha and I had fallen into an easy rhythm, meeting in the late mornings, exploring parts of the city I never would have found alone, sharing meals that turned into hours of conversation. Each day drew us closer, or at least that was what I believed. I had no reason to question the quiet bonds forming between us. I had no reason to doubt the sincerity in her smile, or the gentle way she reached for my arm when crossing crowded streets. For a brief period, I carried the illusion that life had decided to place something rare and fragile in my hands. That evening, she suggested we visit a rooftop bar she said had the best view of the river at night. We met just after sunset. She wore a light dress that fluttered with each step, and there was a softness in her expression that made the night feel special. The streets below were buzzing, but as we climbed the final steps to the rooftop, the noise faded into a distant murmur. The sky was a deep shade of blue, lit by the reflections bouncing off the water. We found a table near the edge, the city stretching endlessly beneath us. She ordered a cocktail with passion fruit, and I chose a beer. For a while, everything felt perfect. We talked about childhood memories, about foods we missed from home, about the strange coincidences that fill life with unexpected meaning. She laughed easily, her eyes sparkling with the city lights, and I felt something inside me settle into certainty. Maybe this was why I had come. Maybe she was the turning point I had been searching for. At some point, she excused herself, saying she needed to make a quick call. I watched her walk toward a quieter corner near the stairway, her silhouette framed by lantern light. I did not intend to listen, but the wind carried fragments of her voice. Soft, hurried, unfamiliar in tone, I heard her say she could not talk long. Then something about meeting soon. The words were vague, but the shift in her expression sent a ripple of discomfort through me. When she returned to the table, she smiled, but the smile did not reach her eyes. There was a heaviness around her, a subtle tension she tried to hide. I wanted to ask what was wrong, yet something stopped me. Maybe fear, maybe instinct. Maybe the quiet awareness that if I asked, I might hear something I was not ready for. Trying to ignore the strange feeling, I offered to walk her home. She agreed, though she looked distracted the entire way down the stairwell. On the street, the bustling energy of the night market returned, but she kept glancing over her shoulder, as if expecting someone. I tried to make conversation, but her replies grew shorter and less focused. When we reached a busy intersection near her apartment, her phone buzzed. She froze mid-step. The glow from the screen illuminated her face, washing color away. She turned her body slightly, shielding the phone from my view. Still, I caught a glimpse of the message preview, a name I did not recognize, a sentence that made my stomach drop. I miss you. Come back when you can. She quickly locked the screen, pretending she had not noticed my reaction. Just my cousin, she said with a forced lightness. She asks too many questions. I nodded, though my pulse quickened. It was the first lie I had ever heard from her, and the sound of it created a small fracture inside me. We continued walking in silence. The closer we got to her apartment building, the heavier the air felt. Finally, she stopped near the entrance. You do not have to walk me all the way, she said gently. I am fine from here. I searched her eyes for truth, but instead I saw something I could not decipher. Guilt. Or fear. Or both. Before I could respond, a voice called her name from across the street. A man stepped out from behind a parked motorbike. Tall, fit, wearing a black shirt and an expression that tightened my chest. He looked at her with familiarity. He looked at me with suspicion. Nisha, he said again, but this time it was not a greeting. It was a question wrapped in accusation. She inhaled sharply, her shoulders stiffening. What are you doing here? She asked, her voice trembling slightly. The man crossed the street with slow, deliberate steps, his gaze fixed on her. You did not answer me all day, he said. I waited. My breath caught. The truth hung in the air like a blade suspended on a thin thread. She glanced between us, her eyes pleading silently for the moment to slow down. Michael, she whispered, this is not what you think. But it was exactly what I thought. The realization washed over me cold and merciless. The lingering looks, the rushed call, the sudden change in her mood, all the pieces slid into place with devastating clarity. Who is he? The man demanded, motioning toward me. I opened my mouth, but no words formed. The sound of traffic faded, the heat of the city disappeared. All I felt was the crushing weight of the truth I had been too hopeful to see. She stepped forward, placing herself between us, as if trying to shield two worlds that had collided too violently. Please, she said softly, not here. It was then that I understood. I was not the only story she was living, not the only hand she held, not the only man who believed her smile was meant just for him. And that night, under the lights of Bangkok, Surrounded by strangers who knew nothing of my heartbreak, the dream I had been living cracked open, exposing a reality I had never prepared myself for. Hazarsan altın çabalama geçebilirim. For a moment, everything around us seemed to freeze. The lights from the street lamps flickered softly. The traffic hummed in the distance, yet none of it felt real. Nisha stood between us, her breath uneven, her hands trembling just slightly. The man stared at her with an intensity that told me their story was not new. It was layered, tangled, and heavy with emotions I had no part in. I felt like an intruder who had unknowingly stepped into the center of a storm that had been building long before I arrived. She finally spoke, her voice quiet but steady enough to carry through the air. "Please, both of you, this is not the place to talk." The man ignored her plea and kept his eyes locked on me. There was no anger in his face, only confusion and disappointment. "I thought you and I were fixing things," he said to her, though his eyes flicked back to me again. "You said you needed space, not this." Her shoulders sank and she pressed her fingers to her forehead as if fighting back a headache. "I did not lie," she murmured. "I needed time. I needed to breathe." "And him?" the man asked, motioning in my direction. "Is he part of that time you needed?" I felt heat creeping up my neck. It was not guilt exactly, more the sting of realizing I had stepped into someone else's unresolved story. I never wanted to be the reason for anyone's pain. I never wanted to be a complication in a life that already seemed tangled. "Nisha," I began, but she turned to me quickly, her eyes wide with a silent plea not to speak yet. "Let me explain," she said softly, and for the first time her voice cracked. She asked the man to give her a few minutes and stepped toward me. Leading me a short distance away, I followed mechanically, my thoughts swirling. When she stopped, she looked down at her hands before meeting my eyes. "I should have told you earlier," she said. "I was not honest. Not because I wanted to hurt you, but because I did not expect you. I did not expect us." I swallowed hard. "Who is he?" She hesitated, searching for words that did not want to come. "We were together for almost 2 years," she said. "Things became difficult. We stopped understanding each other. I ended it, or tried to. He did not want to accept it. He keeps hoping things can go back to how they were." "And do you want that?" I asked. She shook her head slowly. "I do not know. That is the truth. Part of me feels like we are broken in ways we cannot fix. Another part feels guilty for giving up." I felt something sink in my chest. "And where do I fit in this?" Her eyes softened, filled with a sadness that made it impossible to be angry with her. "You were a moment of peace," she whispered, "a breath I did not expect. Being with you felt light. It made me remember parts of myself I thought I lost." A painful honesty hung between us. I wanted to believe her. A part of me did, but another part recognized the danger of becoming a temporary comfort in someone else's uncertainty. "You should have told me," I said quietly. "I know," she replied. "I kept telling myself I would. Then each time we were together it felt wrong to break the moment, and I kept choosing the moment instead." Her confession cut deeper than any lie she could have told. I glanced over her shoulder at the man still waiting near her building entrance. His posture was stiff, arms crossed, jaw clenched. He looked like someone who had loved her for a long time, someone who was not ready to let go. And she was tied to him in ways I could not understand. "Nisha," I said, forcing myself to breathe. "I do not want to be in the middle of this. You deserve clarity, so does he. And I cannot be part of something that still belongs to the past." She blinked rapidly as if holding back tears. "I never wanted to hurt you," she whispered. "I believe you," I said. "But that does not change where we are." The honesty between us felt like a wound being stitched without anesthesia. Painful, necessary, and unforgettable. She stepped closer, her voice trembling. If things were different, maybe... I shook my head gently. Different is not the reality we have. For a long moment, she simply looked at me. Her eyes held oceans of regret, warmth, and confusion. Then she nodded, accepting the truth neither of us wanted to say aloud. "I should go talk to him," she said, her voice barely audible. "Yes," I replied, "and maybe after that, talk to yourself too." She gave a small, broken smile. "Goodbye, Michael. Goodbye, Nisha." I watched her walk back toward the man, her silhouette illuminated by the city lights. They spoke quietly, their words lost in the hum of Bangkok. I did not wait to see how the conversation ended. I turned and began walking in the opposite direction, my footsteps echoing through the night. The dream had ended, and what remained was a truth I would carry with me for a long time. I walked for almost an hour without knowing where my feet were taking me. The night stretched endlessly around me, alive with sounds that felt strangely distant. The noise of Bangkok no longer buzzed with excitement. It felt heavier now, as if the entire city had shifted its rhythm to echo the weight settling in my chest. I kept replaying the moment at the intersection, the message on her phone, the look on her face when truth finally spilled between us. Each memory landed like a slow, deep ache. When I finally reached the riverside, I stopped. The water moved steadily beneath the lights, carrying reflections that broke into ripples, scattering into fragments before forming again. Watching it felt strangely comforting. It reminded me that even broken things could keep moving. Even painful moments could soften with time. I sat on a bench, letting the warm night air settle around me. My thoughts were tangled, but beneath the confusion was a quiet clarity. What happened with Nisha was not betrayal in its simplest form. It was the collision of two lives, each carrying their own unfinished stories. She had not set out to deceive me, she had set out to breathe. And I, lost in my own need for connection, had stepped willingly into her space without knowing the whole truth. We were two people trying to fill empty places without realizing how complicated the emptiness really was. As the minutes passed, I began to understand that the pain I felt was less about losing something and more about confronting what I had been searching for. I wanted something pure, simple, and unburdened. I wanted to believe that stepping away from my old life would magically place me in the path of something perfect. But life did not work like that. People did not work like that. Eventually, I stood up and began to walk back toward my hotel. The city lights guided me, soft and shimmering, painting long trails of gold across the pavement. I realized then that I would remember this place not for the heartbreak, but for the way it opened me up, the way it confronted me with truths I had been avoiding, the way it forced me to face the parts of myself that had been quietly fading. The next morning, I packed my bags with a heaviness I had not expected. Not sorrow exactly, but a quiet, reflective weight. I checked out of the hotel and headed toward the pier. My plan had originally been to explore the islands, but I had no desire to continue pretend adventures when the most important experience of my trip had already unfolded. Instead, I booked an earlier flight home. On the way to the airport, I watched the city blur past the taxi window. Market stalls, temples, skyrises, couples laughing on scooters. Life went on, completely indifferent to my inner turmoil. And strangely, that indifference soothed me. It reminded me that my story was not ending here. It was only shifting. When the plane lifted off the runway and the city shrank beneath me, I felt a bittersweet pull in my chest. Part of me wanted to stay, to see if clarity might one day bring Nisha and me back into the same moment. But I knew that hope was tied to something fragile, something that might never find solid ground. And so I chose to let go, gently, without bitterness. The weeks after returning home were quiet. People asked how my trip was, and I gave them fragments of the story. The food, the river, the temples. I never mentioned Nisha at first. Some memories are too raw to share until they settle into meaning. But as days passed, I found myself thinking of her not with anger, but with a strange tenderness. She had shown me beauty in a city that felt alive in every breath. She had reminded me of my own capacity to feel deeply again. And even though our path ended abruptly, it had taught me something vital. Healing does not come from finding the perfect person. It comes from understanding yourself enough to know what you truly need. And sometimes it takes meeting the wrong person at the right time to reveal that truth. Months later, I still carry that Bangkok night with me. Not as a wound, but as a turning point. A quiet reminder that life can surprise you, that connections can be real even when they are not meant to last, and that sometimes the purpose of a person in your life is not to stay, but to wake something inside you. And Nisha did exactly that. She woke me up. I do not know where she is now. Maybe she made her peace with the man from the intersection, or maybe she chose her own path. I hope she found clarity. I hope she found gentleness. And I hope she remembers the nights we shared with the same bittersweet warmth that now sits within me. Because in the end, what I carried home was not heartbreak. It was depth. It was understanding. And it was the quiet certainty that even the most fleeting connections can shape the course of a life. This was my story, and though it did not end the way I imagined, it became a chapter I would never forget.